Welcome to our Bicentennial Historic Edition, created by the Miamisburg Historical Society as a prelude to our city's 200th anniversary celebration. I am Carol O'Connell, a member of the media production group of the Historical Society. This program introduces a new three-part series, the Miamisburg Town Center Historic District and the 9 sites on the National Register of Historic Places. Each of the 3 programs of our series will feature 3 of these unique buildings and sites. The first set we feature today include the Market Square Building, the former Bobbye Bank site, and the Gwinner Building. Joining me is my guest, Bobbye Sweny, a past president of the Historical Society and an avid historian. And anything you ever wanted to know about Miamisburg, we go to Bobbye for the answer. So take us on our tour.
All right. Thank you, Carol. You know, when we started planning this, I got so excited about this series because I think there are a lot of people in the Miamisburg area who are not probably even living in Miamisburg, who have no idea that we have a historic district in our town, or that within that district there are 9 buildings who are on the National Register of Historic Places. And I think we discovered that during the sesquicentennial when, well, we discovered that we were an historic town, and we began putting together the information that was needed for our big pageant that was going to be a part of our celebration. And in doing that, we discovered that our downtown is a virtual historic treasure. And we should be talking about it and promoting it and rejoicing in it because it makes Miamisburg a historic town. So after the sesquicentennial, our Parks and Recreation Department submitted a nomination form to Ohio's Historical Society requesting that our historic district and these 9 buildings we had chosen be submitted for inclusion in the National Register of Historic Places. And Ohio approved it almost immediately and sent it on to National. And by November of 1975, we received the notification from National that in fact our downtown and these 9 buildings were on the National Register of Historic Places.
And I think it's great, and we do have a map to show just where our first 3 are and where our historic district is. You will see this, it starts at Ferry Street and comes down Main Street, south on Main Street, and we pass the parking lot, which used to be the site of the Bobbye Bank, and we come on down and take in the Gwinner Building, which is across from the historic Miamisburg, our Market Square Building, which is also the Society's home. And right there in the center of town, I think it's just a great place for everything to happen right there. And then the next one that we have is the Gwinner, which is just on the other corner. And so those are the 3 that we will feature today.
Well, when Miamisburg was founded in 1818, the men, our founding fathers, who laid out the 90 lots that were going to be for sale in this new town named Miamisburg, set aside what they called public grounds gratis. And what it was a piece of land that they anticipated at some point Miamisburg would grow to the size that they would need a city building of some kind. And they put it at the intersection of what was then Market Street, that we call Central Avenue now, and Main Street of our downtown. And as Market Street comes in, they divided it. And this little island that formed is where the Market Square Building was built. It's sort of a little rounded island there. And this is our #1 national building. The Market Square Building is a simple, unadorned brick Greek Revival temple with 7 open arches on the lower floor. It's, that says 7 arches. That was written in our book. But I was looking at that the other day, and there are 5 arches on each side, the north and the south, and 2 arches on the back. Now, possibly those were not all open arches because they are now bricked in. But the original access to the upper floor was from 2 stairs, enclosed stairs, one from the south and one from the north. And you have to go outside the first floor to get to the doors to go up to the second floor. And that was used as a meeting place for the city, town hall meetings, council meetings of the city, entertainment, and things of that sort. Anytime we had a big affair downtown, part of it encompassed the second floor of the Market Square building. The lower floor was used as an open-air market. At least half of these or more of these arches were open, and it was these wonderful German people from Pennsylvania, these Pennsylvania Dutch came in, and this was a marketplace for all these people. They brought in their shoe fly pie.
Oh, that reminds me. Shoe fly pie and apple pan dowdy makes your eyes light up and your tummy say howdy.
And it did. And they brought their Panhaus, their wonderful Panhaus, and their smear
And their
case.
Panhaus and smear case
Panhaus
is
and
what?
smear case. Is what? Panhaus is, they would take the bones of the a hog that they had slaughtered and cook all the meat off of it and take that and add it to cornmeal and spices that they put in it and seasonings, and then they would pack it in pans and let it chill and then slice it and fry it, and it's wonderful. And of course smear case, that's simply cottage cheese.
Oh.
But it was their version of cottage cheese. And they would do their homemade breads and probably noodles. They were very big with noodles. And anything from the gardens and the farms, the fresh corn and fresh peas and all the other things that they grew. And they even had fresh fish. Whether it came from the river or not, I don't know. I would question
From the Great
that,
Miami
but
River?
it said, yes, the Great Miami. It was much purer than it was in our day. But they had all of this fresh stuff, and it was a very popular place. The markets operated for about 20 years. And then, you know how people are, they get careless. And the dealers that brought their stuff in were leaving their garbage and trash, and it wasn't doing anybody any good, and the businessmen were getting unhappy about it. So they approached the city fathers and asked them if they would not clean up the market. So they did. They closed it up. This would have been in the early 1970s. And since the city was growing so rapidly, the need for a city building was important. So they closed in the arches and they put some windows in, some of them, and others they put display windows in. There were 2 on the front. They made 2 spaces in the front for businesses of some kind, and then the back of it was used for the city. They took out the north staircase for the jail to make the jail, and they had the city offices there, and then they used the upper floor still for the courthouse, the council chambers and all of that thing, and they still used it for public use. But they still had to go outside and go around and go up the stairs. So the lower floor had such things. The post office finally had a single place to be. They'd been moving it up and down Main Street and driving everybody crazy. Whoever was the postmaster would move it to wherever he wanted the post office, and it got to be an aggravation. So the post office went in. And the Bobbye Bank that we're going to be talking about was in the one part of it. So, and there were jewelers and an optician, and at one time the Marianne shop was there, this ladies' dress shop that was delightful. It was the longest tenant we had in the building. And all the men in town loved the Marianne shop because she knew everybody's size and because they bought them from her.
Yeah.
And so they would go down to get presents for their wives and things. It was just a nice place to shop. So eventually the city had to have a bigger place. And just before the 1913 flood, they built a beautiful building on Main Street where our city civic center is now. And then Ben Zink, who was one of the best butchers in the world, brought all of his meat market in to the Market Square building. And then eventually he moved out and had to have bigger space, so he moved out to the side of town. And other things came in. during the Sesquicentennial. That was our headquarters. We used the building for our headquarters. It was perfect. And then eventually they moved out, and they brought in the Mothers and Children's Services out of Montgomery County, and they came down and had their offices in there. But it was difficult to get children into that building because there's no parking space around it. So the city found a better place for them, and that's when the Historical Society said, ooh, we need a home. And we approached the city, and it became the cherished home of the Miamisburg Historical Society.
Well, that's a wonderful story. I want to say one thing, though, about the Market Square building, because everybody gathered there, and you know our population was way down in the thousands. Oh, yes. But that was a chance for the farmers to come in and then everybody meet and greet. And I think it's kind of interesting because now we have the farmers markets, and the one that is for Miamisburg is right there at Central and Lawrence. At the Christian Church parking lot there, and the farmers or whoever's going to be there, they have to put their own tables up, and some of them have tents that they have to put up, and then they have to be in charge of their own. And then instead of bringing the shoe fly pie and those kinds of things, we have these food trucks that come in. You can get pulled pork, and Amazon has their own food truck.
Yes.
And then, of course, the wonderful kettle corn, where you can get samples of the popcorn there.
Yes.
So a lot of people bring their wares there. And again, it's a nice place for at the community to meet and greet each other when they wouldn't see.
Yeah.
So the farmers market has stayed with us all through those years. But when you talk about the Market Square building becoming our headquarters, I think that's quite interesting because a lot of renovation had to be done. And now with all the different kinds of rules that you have to meet the needs of the handicap as well as building codes, so we had to have some money to do that. So we were able to raise $250,000.
Well, we raised over $200,000. We spent $50,000 of our own money in redoing the first floor. And that we had planned to rest then until we had money and energy to do something with the second floor, until one of our members was so impressed with the work that the Historical Society was doing that he gave us he and his wife gave us a $50,000 grant to have a matching grant, and that's when we started on the upper floor.
Oh, well, it's a wonderful place. When you mentioned the Civic building where it is now, there was a beautiful mansion, I call it a mansion, that sat there, the Weber House. Yes. And they had to tear that down in order to make room for the parking lot for the Civic Center. But we were able to get some of the goods from there, which was the wood, which was beautiful wood. So when you go into our headquarters, you will see an office there, and they've used the fret wood and then the door. And Bobbye, the other day you told me that you scrubbed with a toothbrush to get all the dust and the soot out of the beautiful carving in that door.
It had been in storage a while, yes.
Yeah, but it is beautiful.
Yeah, it is. And we did have a fountain in the back.
Oh, that's
we haven't
right.
mentioned, but we had this fountain, which were for the horses in the early days to water them. And eventually, in the interest of cars going around there, they put it in storage. And one day, one of the people who works for the city found it in storage, and they brought it out, and now it's that beautiful fountain we have at Library Park.
Oh, it's the center of attention right there, too.
Yeah.
But when you did the renovation for the building, you did put an interior staircase. As you walk in, you would see that. And then in the back, which is the back if you're going that way, but it would be the east entrance, there is another staircase which goes around an elevator.
An elevator,
So that meets the needs of handicap. Anybody can get up to the second floor with that elevator, so that's great. And you retain the tin ceilings.
Oh, yes, we did.
Yes, yes, and I'm so glad because several of the buildings downtown still have the tin ceilings, right?
Yeah,
yes,
they're authentic to the
right.
style.
Yes, so we have quite a building there, I think, and we have a lot of memories about that. And I think people should come down and see that and enjoy it
Visit
as we
us.
do.
Oh, we have some wonderful
yes.
displays down there.
Yes, we do.
We do have some display area.
And
but
we change them.
We're rapidly outgrowing our space.
Yes, yes. People are giving us a lot of things that we really need room to display them well.
We have some wonderful archives.
Yes, we do.
So,
Well, that pretty well takes care of Market Square Building.
you know, yes. Yes.
How about moving, or did you want to say something
No,
more about
no.
that? Okay. Let's go to our second building, which is the Groby Bank.
The Groby Bank. What a beautiful building. This it stood at the north end. We have to say stood because unfortunately this building has been torn down. It was at the north end of our historic district. And it was built in 1883 under the direction of Henry Groby, who was the first president of the bank, and he and some of his men, I think you're going to be telling about who founded the Groby Bank. But this is, look at the gorgeous thing. It was a beautiful high Victorian Italianate, 2 stories. You see the 3 bays on the front. I love those. It looks as if the center one should be the entrance to the bank, but it isn't. If you will notice on the right-hand side are the steps that go in that South Bay is where the entrance to the bank was. And with Mr. Groby, he did like the gorgeous style of the Italianate. It has, it's 2 stories, 3 bays, painted brick, and it's elaborately decorated with all these relief. I called them pilasters for years. They tell me that they're pilasters, which rose to a voluted triangular pediment. Now, when we say voluted, that means simply that it had swirls and curls in it instead of just being straight. And it went up to the top of the bay in that area and had a pediment. I see the pediment on the top of the what I would call the center window.
Ah, there we're moving up.
Oh yes, and it had a beautiful Baroque urn sitting on top of it. And then the second story, they made the rounded tops on the windows, but they continued with the lots of decorations on it, and to balance it with the lower floor so that it really has a sense of balance to the whole building. And then to top it off, they put an elliptical arch pediment on the top that was a beautiful thing, and in the middle of it, it says bank.
And you can see that
Bank
there,
in
yes.
just straight letters.
What, the pilasters you call them?
Yes,
No?
pilasters.
What that means is that it from the front it looks like a full column.
Yes.
But they are split down the center so that it gives that impression.
Yes, it does.
One of the things, though, when they were the people who were evaluating us to see if we'd be a historic district, mentioned that they were vernacular commercial buildings.
Yes.
And that meant that they didn't change style in any way. We didn't take away from that. We stuck to the Greek or the
Right.
Italian or the Victorian, and that's what you will see in these.
And one thing that we should mention about to be eligible even to be on the National Register, a building has to be over 50 years old. Well, ours were over 100 already, and then it had to be exactly the way it was when it was built. So you couldn't change the facades and everything that they would have done on some of these buildings for different use. It had to, and we aced that one because ours looked just like they did the day they were built, the ones that are on the register. And that was why we were able to be on the National Register. We passed all the tests.
It is so wonderful that we were able to preserve those and keep them, because so many of the buildings, the older buildings now, it's easier to tear it down because it's so expensive to rehab, to refit, to do all of that work. It's just expensive.
Yes.
Just look at the problem they're having with the beautiful arcade downtown Dayton.
Oh my, yes.
Yes, it's too bad we can't preserve that. But it's expensive. So let's get back to the Groby Bank.
All right, the Groby Bank.
There were no banks in our early days. And so the financial transactions were in Miamisburg were carried out pretty loosely because, you know, maybe just the handshake, a gentleman's agreement, that kind of thing. And they were using what was called shin plasters, which were pieces of poorly secured paper notes of small value, and they were issued by private bankers.
Yes.
So in 1866, the Groby Bank was known as H. Groby and Company, and then he had established that, of course, Henry Groby, with Emanuel Schultz and George Grove. So those, which placed banking then on a more secure basis.
Much more secure
but before
basis.
that, though, even though it was loosely put together, they still had to have mention some kind of collateral. So if they didn't
Often,
pay off
yes.
that loan, it might be their property, it might be something from the farm.
Something from the
But
farm.
you told an interesting
Oh.
story about one of them.
Yes, Harriet Hieronymus's father, they were well-to-do people, had a beautiful farm, and he was one of those that did some loans from his personal funds. But one time he took in as collateral a photography set. It had the cameras and all the necessaries for developing the film. And this was in an early day. And the man had to renege on his loan. So here was Mr. Gephardt with all of this film equipment that he didn't know what to do with. But he had a sister who was interesting. Her name was Edna. And he gave it to her. He gave it to Edna. And Edna became fascinated because the instructions were with it. It must have been very new material. And she read through it, taught herself to be a photographer, and she became a society photographer in Miamisburg. So if you were having a wedding and didn't have an official photographer and she was available, she would do your wedding or your family meeting or whatever. And so it got put to good use in the long run.
Well, that was a lot of photography equipment to carry around now in the digital age, right?
Yes, now they take it with your telephone.
Yes,
And,
yes.
what can you do?
Right.
Citizens Bank was established in Citizens Bank, which was a new bank too, established in 1883 by Bernard Pansing and some others. I never have figured out who the others were. They just keep saying Bernard Pansing and others. And they merged with Groby Bank. And then the bank was incorporated and became First National Bank, and that's what we remember it as, First National Bank. But the Henry Groby, who started this bank, was a very wealthy man. He was born in Pennsylvania the year after Miamisburg was formed in 1819. And he came here when he was 21 years old and got into building. He became a builder, a very well-known builder, a very successful builder. And then he got into tobacco and real estate, farms particularly. And then with his two banking partners, they got into lumber and coal, which is where Grove and Weber came from, which was a big coal company, lumber company in our city. George Grove, who was one of his partners, was married to Jacob Kircher's daughter, Christine. So he was part of the Weber family that developed later on. Anyway, there were some very important men in this banking business. Well known in Miamisburg. Of course, Henry Groby was the president of the bank for many years, and then his son-in-law took over. His name was N.J. Catro, and N.J. was married to his daughter. So there were Thomas Lyons, Thomas Bernard Lyons Jr. was the president. I think they got him from Citizens Bank. I think he was the cashier there. And then his son, Thomas Gamble Lyons, was a president, and his son, Terry Lyon, was the last president of the Groby Bank. And it was then became a part of the...
Well, they just kept merging and
merging. Interstate Corporation, they became part of Interstate Corporation, and then it became Star Bank, and it's been a dozen and one other thing since then.
Well, this is all great, and we've got to move on now to the Gwinner block.
All
It was
right.
called Block.
Block.
It brings us to our third building, and is also known as the KP building, which means the Knights of Pythias, which was one of the social groups that were in town, and that is right at the corner of Central and Main Street, right to the north of Market Square Building. And the style of that is the Second Empire style, with its it has 3 floors of painted brick, and the top level is a slate mansard roof and dormered windows, and the 6 bay facades on the front of which is Main Street has 2 cast iron storefronts on the ground floor, and every once in a while somebody will put in a business there. So you want to tell us how it was built originally?
Well, it was built by Louis Urschel, and apparently went into bankruptcy. We found some indications that it was built and used as a hotel for a while, but in 1877 they bought it from the Mr. Gwinner bought it, and he had his son had a pharmacy in there, and then we had a number of pharmacies in there, and then the Pythians leased the top floor of it for their rituals and what have you. And then when Mr. Gwinner died, they bought it, and it became the KP building. And it's had all kinds of pharmacies and Silberman's and Anderson's in there. And it had the Miamisburg News in part of it, and it had apartments in the back of it. And it had, in addition to the Miamisburg News, the Wagner potato chips.
Oh yeah,
Very well known in
Miamisburg was known
yes.
for their potato
Yes.
chips. That's right.
But
Yes, and now though, there are still apartments there, as well as there's a disc jockey at the end has all his business in there, and then a young entrepreneur is moving in also toward the back of that. So so those buildings keep going in and out. But as you can see in the renovation, and there, right there on the corner, is a triangular entrance to it, and that is an antique store. And I think that's so interesting to have an antique store right across the street from from Market Square Building, where our offices are.
It's typical. The thing I love about this building is on the back of it is a 2nd-story outhouse. Inside the building, they had to have, there was no plumbing in those days.
It was an apartment,
and they had
sure.
an outhouse on the 2nd floor, and you can see it from the outside. We haven't been able to get in and take a picture of it, but it's still there.
We can see it from the outside,
yes.
It's not, make sure they know it's not in use anymore.
Yeah, no need for it anymore. But the honey dippers that took care of all the outhouses in town were the ones that serviced that, and our children in our school programs get a big kick out of having a bathroom on the 2nd floor that was outside. Yeah.
I can imagine what they're configuring in their mind about that. Well, Ben Zink was the original meat market there, as well as the Hamilton Grocery, and then people still are renting the apartments there.
Yes.
Yes.
There's still apartments in it.
Oh yes, yes. And that brings us this segment to a close, and we will be looking for the second segment, and that will include other parts of our series. You want me to tell what they are?
Sure, why not?
Well, they'll be at the Baum Opera House,
Yes, and everyone knows that.
the Liesenhof Block, and the A.R. Stocker Building.
Both on Main Street.
Right, yes, yes. And then as time goes on, we will be seeing more about that, and hopefully one of these times we can get inside some of those houses and see what they have done to them.
Nice.
Yes,
Nice.
yes. Well, really appreciate you being here, Bobbye. You know so much about so many things.
Oh, I love history.
You do.
I love Miamisburg.
Yes, yes. And you could even tell us what the ladies were doing when their husbands were out here doing all the banking and the building and everything.
They were joining the WCTU trying to get rid of the bars.
Oh, and there were a lot in that time,
There were
weren't
in
there?
those days, yes.
Yes, yes.